Senator Kardashian blackmailed and incriminated. E-papers hacked and planted with human-first articles. Our anti-android bill may just pass with a resounding success. Down with the chips!
Down with the chips, but...
What is it now? Are my glasses too small again?
No, listen. I thought maybe, instead of just proposing one bill and supporting it, the one that we want to pass, we secretly create a false second political persona that people can vote for. Something so evil and sinister that no one in their right minds will ever support it.
You mean like some sort of android despot threatening to end all human life? That sort of thing?
Yes, exactly. Down with the chips.
Chips?
Look, can you name one time in history that this sort of plan has completely, disastrously and stupendously backfired?
Well, no, but what do we name this made-up android political figure?
Well, it has to be something very innocuous, so that when people see that name, it produces totally the opposite effect, and they fear it.
I don't know. Skynet.
Isn't it nice when choices are simple? If you're having a burger, just choose between ketchup or brown sauce. And if you're having a hot dog, just choose between mustard or custard. And if you're playing a board game, you just have to choose between competitive or cooperative. Well, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we're plunging deep into the recesses of the dark side of board gaming, where the lines are blurred, the pitch is muddy, and the sky looks grim. That's right, we're looking at semi-cooperative board games, and out of its womb comes a newborn baby called New Angeles, with its oozingly gorgeous placenta of the cyberpunk android universe. Do you think I maybe overdid it a little bit with the placenta analogy, because I thought it was good. New Angeles is the famed megalopolis of the not so distant future, where hackers have run amok and evil corporations are trying to get their hands, nay, your hands, and seize every asset and capital possible, except that one of you might be a federalist, a secret government patsy, trying to bring everything down.
The proposition of New Angeles is pretty simple. Each turn you will be trying to make an offer and get your action resolved. If it is your turn, you will place your action card in the main offer slot, and then everyone else will get a chance to counter offer. Now, if there aren't any cards in there already, it's pretty simple. They just put theirs down and make a counter offer to yours. However, if there are already some in there, you have to pay with action cards to replace the one that's already there. And finally, once you've done that, anyone that hasn't placed a counter offer or a main offer gets a chance to vote on which one they want to resolve.
But why? Why do any of this? Well, it's not just for the loose cars and fast women. At the start of the game, your corporation will be dealt a secret goal card which will tell you who your rival is, and three things might happen here. First, you might get dealt someone else's corporation as your secret rival, meaning that by the end of the game, you have to have more capital than they do, and in that case, you win. The other thing that might happen is you might get dealt yourself as the secret rival, which means you're in competition with yourself and being the best, and nothing else but the best will do, except of course you can be second, because that's also fine. And in a game of 6 players, you can also be third, because there's so many of you, isn't there? It's just really hard.
But my friends, Efka left the tastiest card until last, and that is the aforementioned Federalist. Because things aren't really quite peachy in New Angeles. Human first terrorists are a pain in the bum, organised crime is everywhere, and diseases are eating people faster than people eat chicken. And then of course there's the people themselves, and what do people love? Going on strike. All of this causes disruption to the city and increases the threat. And if the threat ever reaches 25, you lose the game. Except, of course, if you are the Federalist. In which case, as long as you have 25 capital, you will win the game, because the government sees these terrible, corrupt corporations and seizes back power from them. Which makes this dystopian future already better than our own world.
This entire phase where you're making offers in New Angeles is called making a deal, and never has there been a more appropriate name for a phase, because New Angeles lets you trade almost anything that you have apart from these action cards that are in your hand. See, whenever you are making a deal, a new asset will be revealed. And these are just crunchily delicious because they let you break the rules of the game in the most magnificent of ways. However, to get that asset, you need to have your action card selected as the offer. So if your turn comes up and you want to get that asset, the best thing you can do is discuss with the other players. What is it that we need to deal with? If the human first units and organized crime are a problem, then maybe pitch an action that will let you remove some of these figures. However, if you don't have something that is quite as strong but still want to win the asset, well, you can always say, hey, if you vote for my action, I'll give you all these things. And the crunchiest part is that because you don't know who your opponent's rivals are, you might just be giving away capital to the person who has you as their rival.
But you have to be really careful because sometimes someone will offer something that is mutually beneficial and is perfect to deal with the situation that you're in. I mean, if someone said they were going to bring you a turkey for your Thanksgiving dinner, you're not going to try and upstage them with your bowl of mac and cheese, no matter how good you think it is. This track here represents the needs of your city, and every 2 rounds the game will trigger a demand round, at which point the needs of the city for things like ice cream scoops, margaritas, SIM cards and baby tears will have to be fulfilled. Otherwise, the threat track takes a huge jump, and that is very good news for the Federalist.
And if you are a Federalist, you have to be very, very sneaky. You see, there are very many ways in the game to increase threat in major ways. For example, these Android tokens, when they are on a certain location, they will inevitably produce these resources, which will then go over here and go towards the demand that everyone needs in New Angeles. But it doesn't mean that what you should do is immediately move this Android token to somewhere else that produces resources that no one needs, because everyone will know that you are working for the government. And it is then very easy to shut you out by simply not voting on the actions that you propose and making you completely ineffective for the rest of the game. However, it doesn't mean that you don't have many other more subtle ways of increasing threat, like these illness tokens. Now, if an illness token is in a location and an action involves that location, then threat will increase by a measly 2. And whilst 2 isn't very bad, it's also a good excuse for you, because you might try to convince your players that, hey, we really need to deal with this strike. And yes, there is an illness token, but, you know, it's just to threat. It doesn't really matter. And if the other players do become very suspicious about your brazen illness activities, the game offers up good excuses, like this card that increases your capital by 2 every time threat increases because of illness, meaning that you are a beast of your own particular environment, and your environment is money. And money is a good excuse to do anything.
Every corporation is good at something, like Jinteki will deal with those aforementioned illness tokens, Hasbiroid is great with labour and resources, and NBN controls strikes through the media. And when you or anyone does the thing that you're good at, you will get some capital. Like, so if you're playing Jinteki and somebody removes one of these illness tokens from the board, it will net you 2 capital.
The other way of getting money are these investment cards, which will ask you to have certain things on the board. For example, this card will ask you to have human first units on the board, and if you do have them when the investment card scoring phase happens, then you'll get points for them. However, they are probably the weakest link in this sausage pie that is New Angeles, because sometimes they'll ask you to have good things like these Pristic units, which are basically robot riot gear guards, and sometimes they'll ask you for bad things like these organized crime. And if organized crime, for example, is a threat for that particular round, every other player will want to get rid of them. And sometimes you'll just find it impossible to convince them that, hey, this isn't such a big deal, we can leave them around, they're fine. People will simply not agree with you and you won't score points. And even though every time you do get an investment card, you get a choice of 2 and get to keep one, well, the state of the board in New Angeles is in constant flux and changes. Well, it changes as the victory conditions in a game of flux. And you feel like you have no control of them. And thematically, They feel tacked on, but only because all the other thematic elements in New Angeles are simply great.
It's not just the gorgeous artwork, which to be honest is mostly lifted from the Android Netrunner card game, that makes you feel like you are entrenched in this corporate world of backstabbing, but it's how the game brings all the elements together. Like, for example, in the first game I got this asset card, which let me swap out my rival card for the secret one that no one had taken, and that of course was the Federalist card, which thematically meant that the government was offering me a deal which I could choose to take now, or assess the economic situations and phone my FBI friends a little bit later and say, you know what, shit's going down, I want out. And that's great because it's not just the cards that give you these situations, but the game births them organically. Shall I do the placenta analogy again?
But before you rush out and get yourself the new hot cyberpunk Christmas present that you've always wanted and show your friends the backstabby side that they didn't quite know you had, there's a few things you should know about New Angeles. First of all, even though the box doesn't quite suggest it, this is a very, very long game. If you're playing with 6 players, it's pretty safe to assume that a game can take up to 4 hours, and that's mostly the negotiating that eats up that time. Here's the thing, New Angeles borrows quite a few things from games like the Resistance, social deduction games, but those games are short and filled with elation, whereas New Angeles is mostly filled with tepid excitement. Sure, there will be moments where just full to the brim of cheering and wheeling and dealing, but sometimes nothing will happen, or at least nothing that's very exciting. If the action that was proposed is clear to everyone to be very good and nobody wants to go in there and challenge it, then you're just kind of going through the motions. And for a 3-hour game, could be a little bit better.
Games without a Federalist just aren't quite as much fun because threat is no longer a problem and it all becomes about the capital. It might be a bit tense if you all have yourself as your own rivals, in which case you're all just trying to get the most you can, but you might get 2/3 of the way through the game and think, I just can't catch up. There is also the problem that if everybody is happy with the level of capital they have, and it's likely to happen in a game where you do have a Federalist because they don't care about how much capital they have, you feel like you're just going through the motions because the game never really manages to get synergy between the level of threat and the amount of capital you have and make that a tense situation.
A lot of people are comparing this game to Fantasy Flight Own's Battlestar Galactica. However, we think that this game is more in line with Plaid Hat's Dead of Winter. Both games have a betrayer, both games have multiple winning conditions where one person can win or multiple people can win or no one can win. Both games play best at 4, and both games need a target number of resources that you need to reach. Having said that, New Angeles is very much its own game.
And I really enjoyed this game. I enjoyed that there's a management of different resources and each corporation has its own special ability, and the wheeling and the dealing, and you're annoying some people and you're pandering to others for your own personal game, just like a used car salesman of the cyberpunk world.
And that's fine. The wheeling and dealing part in New Angeles really works when it does, except the strategy elements don't quite come together. Look, really what I'm doing right now is not comparing it to Monopoly, but if most people's problem with Monopoly is that it's overly long, it gets everyone annoyed with each other, and the strategy elements are really wonky, then I'm not sure that I can in good conscience recommend New Angeles, because we really enjoyed it. And we feel like some people will be a lot more forgiving to these faults than we were, but they are there.
How can people not be forgiving of it with this lovely box?
I don't know. It doesn't look like anything to me. Thank you so much for watching our review. If you'd like to watch another one, just click on the video in the box. And if you really enjoyed our stuff, please subscribe and follow us on social media. Bye bye!